Hey, welcome back. This is part two of me answering your questions. So the next question is favourite writer. So favourite writer, I've tried to condense it a bit because obviously comics is more of a visual medium, so I will gravitate towards artists when I'm, when there's a comic that'll stick in my mind. It'll be down a lot of time to the artwork. So favourite writers, straight off the bat, Alan Moore. Um, Ever since, like I said, his work in 2000 AD, and then I used to get Warrior back in the early 80s, where that's where I first got exposed to V for Vendetta, even though I didn't understand anything that V for Vendetta was on about. I didn't get the political symbolism or significance or what the story was about, but his writing just drew me in, and Miracle Man or Marvel Man, it was called back in the day. Wow, I've never read a superhero comic like that. And of course, Captain Britain, when it was in the Mighty World of Marvel, the British reprint comic. And then, of course, his 2000 AD work, and then I followed him straight over to DC in the mid to early 80s when he did Swamp Thing. And from that, I've always tried everything that he's done. The only thing I've never really tried is the Avatar stuff, what he did. Basic reason because it's not really him writing it; it's his ideas or his stories, and somebody's adapted it. And I just hate Avatar's artists, so I'm never bothered with them. So yeah, Alan Moore number one, and then I'd say easily number two would be I would say it's Peter Milligan. Again, I got into Peter Milligan, found out about him through 2000 AD, and then through an Eclipse, I think it was Eclipse or Pacific comic called Strange Days, what he did with Brendan McCarthy, and it was the whole trippy psychedelic of artwork of Brendan McCarthy tied in with equally trippy writing by Pete Milligan, but it was done in such a poetic way and fun and pop cultural way that I understood what was going on. And then, of course, the thing that really cemented my love for Pete Milligan was the work he did on Shade the Changing Man. For me, I know people love Doom Patrol by Grant Morrison, and I'm a man on that lot. But for me, the pioneering Vertigo comic from DC was Shade of Change Man. It dealt with questions of gender, sexuality, society. Through this, the closest thing I could put for Shade of Change Man is the closest I've ever seen a comic interpretation of The Man Who Fell to Earth. It was a stranger in a strange land, and I've never seen it dealt in such a fun way, in such a relevant way. It was years before its time. It was, and I think that's why it's often got overlooked by Doom Patrol and got overlooked and been left in the shadows quite a bit by a lot of people. It's because it wasn't old bells and whistles like Doom Patrol's. Hey, look at me! I'm zany, I'm crazy, I'm wee woo, which was attractive. It was great. It was addictive. It's like crack cocaine. Whereas Shade is more subtle, equally trippy and equally out there, but done in a much more, almost like a literary way. So yeah, absolutely brilliant, Pete Milligan. Then Grant Morrison, of course, we just mentioned. I got into him first through 2000 AD with Zenith. I'll just stand up. So Zenith was his first mainstream comic. He did a few Future Shocks from 2000 AD and things like that before Zenith, and a series he did in Near Myths as well, which was an independent British comic. But Zenith was basically 2000 AD's first attempt at doing a superhero title, because before then Zenith was strictly science fiction and fantasy. So this was Zenith, and it was just groundbreaking, and it also had amazing artwork by Steve Yule. So as you can see, absolutely brilliant. So yeah, and that's when I first got into Grant Morrison, and even then, even before he moved to DC with Animal Man and Doom Patrol, he was reinventing what you could do with superhero comics with Zenith. So yeah, Grant Morrison is definitely next in line. And then after that, I would say Neil Gaiman. When I think a lot of people's stories are similar to this about when they first get into Sandman. The first few issues, I stuck with it. It's all right. It was because I love a good horror comic anyway, and that's the tropes of Sandman originally. It was very horror centric, had a very Lovecraftian feel to it. But then and I love Sam Keith, but when Sam Keith left the artwork and Mike Dringenberg came on, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was that episode when they're all in the cafe with is it Doctor Destiny? I think it was. That was the issue that cemented it for me, because yeah, it still had the very strong horror elements then, but the mythos and the characters getting more fleshed out of the whole world of Sandman. And of course, from there, Neil Gaiman did Death, which was just such a beautiful comic. And he did the Eternals for Marvel 1605, was it? And of course, he did Miracle Man after Alan Moore left, and he's doing it again recently. You can't wait for that. So excited about. Definitely do an overview of Miracle Man at some point. But I just loved how, for me, Neil Gaiman is like England's answer to Ray Bradbury, and I love how he still loves comics. So he doesn't look down on comics because that made his name, but it's opened up a world of literary, doing more literary aspects with doing his novels, etc. So yeah, Neil Gaiman, brilliant. And then I say a good all-rounder of modern comics is Jeff Johns. I know he's had some controversy recently. I don't care. I don't try and get into that. And you can't go off everything that people say on the internet, to be honest. But I think he's a good, solid writer. I know Mark Waid. Mark Waid was like the one who really thrust the Flash into being a top tier superhero. Really good character work. But for me, I always find Mark Waid a bit too cozy, if that makes sense. He's good, but like people, this is complete aside, but people love the New World's Finest. For me, it just leaves me a bit. It's too much. It's comics of a bygone day. I don't mind doing retro comics like Astro City. Oh, top notch. But it does it in a more timeless manner. Where I just think Mark Waid's gone a bit dated now, and people are going to hate me for saying that, but everybody's got their own opinion. But yeah, Jeff Johns. But then Jeff Johns is like an elevated Mark Waid in my eyes, and the work he's done, especially on the Flash, Green Lantern, Hawkman, JSA, which a lot of people put as the favourites, which I had, but sadly I lost all the books once my marriage broke up. Violence. So yeah, Jeff Johns next, and then Garth Ennis, who he's like the enfant terrible of comics. What I like about Garth Ennis, he didn't do much for 2000 AD at all, really. And yet he's the one of the ones who came from 2000 AD who still kept a very 2000 AD mentality. So all his comics have always had this slight abrasiveness, slightly punky, fun. Let's see how far we can poke the bear kind of mentality with Preacher, which one of the best comics of all time. Punisher, all the comics he's done since. He loves his war comics because he was a big fan of battle and action from the UK, and he brought that sensibility into a lot of stuff he's done in America. So he's redefined war comics for Americans because they were never exposed to the style of war comics what we had in the UK, which much more hard hitting, much more true to life than what were Americans ones like Sergeant Rock will love. Sergeant Rock was very bloated and hey, America's great. Look at me, we're indestructible. So yeah, Garth Ennis next. And then another more modern one, Brian K. Vaughan. I just think I love how he's redefined how comics should be read. You can either enjoy him in monthly format, or you get a big payoff when you buy the collected edition because it's one long story. but it's done in such a way where the fun chapters of like 6 issues each. So I love Saga. That's one of my all-time favourite comics. I just love the characters. And you've got Paper Girls, which again, it's the best. That is the best comic to introduce to, especially teenagers. I think. Like my daughter, she's more of a manga reader, but I've got a wanted to try Paper Girls because the artwork is just so suited for people who are used to manga, and the storyline is just it's great for people who listen to Stranger Things. And then of course you've got Why the Last Man and so many others. He's just a really really high quality good writer. And you've got Ed Brubaker, who started off as an indie comic writer slash artist, doing slice of life kind of like Chester Brown stuff, and then he moved on to getting a real name for himself with Captain America, and now his stuff what he does with Sean Phillips is just so good. And then I just feel it's a bit male centric at the moment, so I'm going to throw a few female writers in here. First one, who was a trailblazer for women writers in comics, was Annie Shenty. Her Daredevil run, it really divides people, but I'm on the division where I think is one of the best runs of Daredevil ever, especially with John Robinson Jr. on the artwork. So Annie Shenty, and then you've got Stephanie Phillips, who I've been loving on Harley Quinn at the moment. And Grimm is really worth checking out from Boom. I did get the first few issues, but now I've decided, because with Boom, what I like about Boom, they do really reasonably priced collections, and they do them not too long after the story arc is finished. So I'm just going to get hers in collected edition because I'll go back and read them. And then you've got Kelly Thompson, who I love on Captain Marvel. If you don't like Captain Marvel just because she's a woman who's stronger than a lot of the male superheroes, there's something mentally wrong with you, because she's such a well-rounded character in Kelly Thompson's hands, and she's great. It's the only, put it this way, it's the only ongoing Marvel comic I read at the moment until the new Fantastic Four comes out. And then skipping back to the guys, but these are more writers who've made a name for themselves the past 10 years or so. That's Tom Taylor. These two are thrown together because it's the two Toms, Tom Taylor and Tom King. Tom Taylor I think I like a bit more because there's always good payoff with Tom Taylor. His characters there's always a few characters in any of his comics that you warm to, so that's always a good hook if you can warm to a character in a comic. And the payoffs are always good, the endings are always good, like the recent Superboy storyline, a long-running storyline, has wound up really nicely now, and it's opened doors to another storyline. And then you've got Tom King. When he's on fire, he's amazing, like Mr. Miracle, Strange Adventures. But then he dips. I mean, I thought I got all the Catwoman and Batman Catwoman, and enjoyed it, but at the end when it finished, I was like, oh. So I've read 12 issues, and what have I read? The dialogue was amazing. The dialogue was fun. So he's one of those where when he's on a really high, the payoff, when he's really good, the payoff is amazing. But then you can have this weird kind of comic. But then he'll do ones where they're solid, like the recent Batman-centric ones, that 6-issue one. But I forget the name. So, but I'll always try him. I'll always try Tom King. That sound of good writing if you're willing to try anything they do. And then two of the 2000 AD icons, John Wagner and Pat Mills. Pat Mills is still an angry young man at the age of 73. He still likes to overthrow the government, and he's still not lost any of his energy and enthusiasm for getting new readers for comics. And he's written two of my favourite characters of all time, Slane and Nemesis, and they never get old. I've read them so many times, and it's still fresh, and it's with his energy and his punkiness, and he always finds the perfect artist for his comics. And you've got John Wagner, who's the man, who's done Strontium Dog, who's one of my all-time favourite comic characters. Just so cool. I've elaborated and spouted about how I love Strontium Dog in a 2-episode video, and he also, of course, is the genius behind the world of Judge Dredd with Carlos Square. Doesn't write as much as he used to. I mean, the guy's in his 70s now, but He's one of those writers who he's like Stephen King. Even though he's gotten older, his voice hasn't got dull. He's not become one of these angry young men, angry old men like I love Frank Miller, but I don't think he's. I think he peaked too early. Alan Moore's not. Alan Moore's still a weird fucker, and long may he be. So yeah, those two, and then finally, a series of art writers for different reasons. First one, Alejandro Jodorowsky, who I mentioned before, who without him we wouldn't have the ink out. And if you just read the ink out and leave it at that for him, then you're missing out on so much. You need to get further into his universe, the Meta Barons and the Techno Priests. He picks the perfect artist. The artwork in Humanoids books are just chef's kiss. They're some of the best you can get. So yeah, he's just a genius. He's a vision. He really is a visionary. And then finally, this is both strong in band themselves, but together they are the perfect comedy writing team, and that is Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis. And on that note, I will finish here, and there'll be another part where I answer the next few questions. Okay, bye.